So what's going on guys, Kate is here and welcome back to a brand new video. For today I will show you the best Lost Ark's PVE tier list in 2022 for good players. So Lost Ark was released to EU and NA almost a month ago, and by now you should be familiar with the game and different classes. But now the big question is, which class is actually good for endgame content and for high skilled players? So I've done a bunch of testing and here is the best list that you've been waiting for. And just before we start, I have made a full 30-minute video on the best PVE builds for all classes. So no matter which class you choose to play from this list, check my PVE build video and there you will find the best builds. So then if this sounds interesting to you, then let's get right into it. So then moving over to the first class, which is the gunlancer, and he gets to be in the S tier. So this class has great monster clearing speed, with really good AoV abilities like the sharp gunlance and the guardian's thunderbolt. This makes his leveling and dungeon farming process easy and enjoyable, even despite his low movement speed. Besides just damage, the gunlancer can also support his team with shields, damage reduction buffs and target armor debuffs. In endgame he can also interrupt many dangerous boss skills. Then as well be aware that the gunlancer is the only class whose spacebar moves them backwards. This could be a small turnoff for some players, but after a few days of gameplay you will get used to it. So overall the gunlancer is a highly efficient class that doesn't require many resources or gold to be viable. So then in my summary, the gunlancer in PvE is cost efficient, he has high consistent damage, he can ignore most of the boss or mob attacks, and then lastly he has very good damage reduction and shield buffs. And then for the negatives, this class is low mobility, like I said he has the backwards dodge, and lastly his skills have short range, and that's about it. So then moving over to the second class, which I put at the S tier, and it is the gunslinger. So this class can swap to 3 different weapons in order to match any fight, which makes her a very well balanced class during the leveling and dungeon farming phase. She has everything in her kit including mobility, single target and AoE damage. And as you have 3 different weapons with multiple abilities in each one, you can never run out of skills to use. So then in my summary, the gunslinger has very long range, she's high mobility and she has a lot of high crit debuffs. But then for the negatives, this class has low defenses, she is not the easiest class to play and learn, and you will do less damage when playing more safe, and that's about it. So then moving over to the next class, which is the berserker, and we want to put him right next to the gunslinger. So the berserker is a class with high burst and large AoV skills. His damage compensates more than enough for the long cooldowns and low mobility. He can obliterate groups of mobs in just few seconds. So then in a summary, the berserker doesn't have a terrible but instead a decent mobility. He has bunch of burst rotations, and most of the time he will be in a burst mode, which will increase his overall damage. And then moving over to the downsides, and a lot of times in the burst mode you will have to be very careful about your HP, which means that you have less room for error. Then as well he has long skill cast time, and for endgame this class requires for you to use high tier engravings, and that's about it. So then for the fourth class we have the wardancer, and he is the last S tier class. So the wardancer is one of the highest mobility classes in Lost Ark, with skills like the lightning kick. This skill has low cooldowns and increases the overall traveling speed. She lacks AoE skills but makes up for it with high single target damage abilities. This class heavily focuses on swiftness, which increases the movement speed, attack speed and reduces the cooldowns of all of your skills. So then in my summary, this class is really good mobility, she has good stagger aka stunning skills, and then as well she is a burst synergy class with very high single target damage, and you can perform very fast counter attacks. And then for the negatives, sometimes you can get low on mana. This class in PvE depends a lot on back attacks. Wardancer requires basic attacks, and you have long cooldowns on your burst skills, and that's about it. So then moving over to the next class, which I will put in the A tier, and it is the deadblade. So this class has big AoE skills with high damage to eliminate big mob groups very quickly. She has also good mobility to make the dungeon farming process very easy. Her skills suffer from relatively long cooldowns, so make sure that you group up your enemies to kill them very efficiently. Normally, a Deadblade's gameplay is focused around gaining the death orb meter as fast as possible, then unleashing the blade burst and then repeating the same process all over again. So then in a summary, the Deadblade is very fun and high mobility class. She has low skill downtime and most of the time, you have at least one ability to use. And then for the endgame, you have a team synergy buff that will make your teammates do even more damage. And then for the negatives, the Deadblade requires back attacks, you can get punished if you miss your skills, and then lastly some of your abilities have a long cast time, and that's about it. So then moving over to the next one, which is the sorceress, and we want to put her right next to the Deadblade class. So the sorceress is one of the two starting mage classes available in Lost Ark. She specializes in dealing ranged magic damage with elements of fire, lightning and ice. This is a good class for good players as she deals very high damage at all stages of progression. She can even easily complete solo or group content. So then in my summary, this is the highest DPS range class that has high burst damage as well. Your cooldowns are very low and this class will be acceptable for any PvE content. But then for the negatives, the sorceress can get quite squishy. She has low mobility, long cast times and low push immunity, and that's about it. Okay, so now we have come to one of the last A tier classes and it is the shadowhunter. So this class has small AoE skills, but she compensates for that with low cooldowns and high mobility. She's one of the few transformation classes in Lost Ark. With her demonized identity, this means that when her bar is at full, you can activate the demonized form and become a different creature with different abilities. This adds more mobility and overall damage. So then in my summary, the shadowhunter has strong stagger, she has low cooldowns on demonized skills, then as well you will get a small healing when transforming, and lastly you can use this class as a melee or medium range. And then for the negatives, a lot of times you perform inconsistent stagger. All of your builds will require high specialization. At lower levels you will get a very quick demon form. And lastly, at the endgame, this class requires level 3 class engravings, which are not that easy to get, and that's about it. So then moving over to the next class, which is the artillerist, and we want to include him right in the A tier. So the artillerist is a slow but deadly damage focused class. Most of his skills deal damage in huge AoE, which helps to clear big monster waves very fast. Artillerist starts with Enchanted Shell skill, which applies a armor defense debuff on each hit to further increase your damage. This is a easy to learn but difficult to master class. His main damage skills like the air raid and homing barrage have a delay between the hit and cast time, so you require knowledge of boss attack patterns and mechanics to play the artillerist to its maximum potential. So then in my summary, the artillerist is a high crit chance class with high survivability and consistent damage output, but then on the other hand you have low burst potential, then as well slow casting speed, and at the endgame you will need to learn boss mechanics, and that's about it. So then for the 9th class we have the striker, and we want to include him right in the A tier. So the striker is a high mobility class with small AoE skills. At early stages, this class is slower at clearing big monster groups compared to other classes until you unlock and invest in your bigger AoE skills. Nevertheless, stronger elite and boss monsters are easy target for the striker's single target focus skills. Striker is a burst synergy class because of the attack speed buff and crit chance debuff he gets from his abilities. So then in my summary, this class is really good mobility with fast counter attacks and decent stagger damage. And then for the negatives, he has low defenses, he is very back attack dependent, and lastly the striker class has long burst skill cooldowns, and that's about it. So then moving over to the next class, which is the Scrapper, and we want to put him right in the B tier. So the Scrapper is the agile fighter class that focuses purely on melee kicks and punches. Her identity lets her use skills by alternating between both of her energy types called stamina and shock. She starts gaining insane damage skills to clear bosses and large groups of monsters at the end game. But despite so many positives, there's also negatives, one being the lack of ranged abilities. Most of your attacks are extremely close range and they have very narrow hitboxes and small AoEs. Still, these skills feel very impactful to use and once mastered, don't hold you back. So then in my summary, the Scrapper has low cooldowns, she is extremely extremely mobile and can sustain high DPS. And then for the negatives, like I already mentioned, she has no self-protection, she has short range attacks and lacks any significant AoE skills, and that's about it. So then moving over to the next class, which gets to be in the B tier, and it is the deadeye. So this class can swap to 3 different weapons in order to match any situation, which makes him a very well balanced class. He has everything in his kit including mobility, single target and AoE damage. The downtime for this class's damage skills isn't as bad as it is for other similar classes. With 16 skills you can slot into the skill bar, the deadeye can rotate between the pistol and rifle after they have used all of their shotgun skills. So then in my summary, this class is high mobility, he has decent stagger and all of his skills and things for the class is easy to get even at tier 1 content. And then for the negatives, this class is very back attack reliant, most of the damage skills are locked behind a animation, and even though you use guns, bunch of the skills are for melee range, which makes you to either way lose damage or go into a difficult position, and that's about it. So then going over to the next one, which is the soulfist class, and this time we put him right next to the deadeye. So the soulfist is a well-rounded class with good mobility, single target and AoE damage. This combination makes the leveling and PvE experience pretty smooth but neither too slow or too fast. This class has world decimation ability, which is the highest damage skill in the game. She raises both hands in the air collecting energy, forming into a huge dense energy ball that eradicates everything. But hitting with this ability is hard and takes long time. So then in my summary, the soulfist is a high mobility class with high burst damage, the strongest awakening skill in the game, and a fast normal skill animations. But then for the negatives, she has very long ability downtimes, she is very resource/gold reliant, then as well she very focuses on specialization for her builds, and her most powerful awakening skill can easily miss the target, and that's about it. So then moving over to the last and final B tier class, which is the sharpshooter. So this class has skills with low cooldowns and quick animations. The clearing speed might be slower compared to other classes. His high mobility helps in avoiding hits and dealing consistent damage to the enemies during the endgame dungeons. Sharpshooters suffer from low stagger and part break, so they don't contribute too much to the party besides just damage at the endgame raids. So then in my summary, this class has burst DPS, he is high mobility, you can equip high crit rate tripods that will increase your damage significantly. And then lastly, you can deal damage from any position. And then for the negatives, the sharpshooter is very squishy. He has low stagger and most of his skills are animation locked, and that's about it. So then for one of the last classes in Lost Ark, we have the Bard. And as he is a support class, you can't really put this type of class in a tiered list. So I made a specific category for support, so here it is. The Bard is a purely support class for groups and is a highly requested role for endgame content. While her huge AoE clearing skills are up to par with other classes, she lacks any high single target damage. If you want to play a support class, you need to understand the abilities of your teammates and coordinate with them to bring out their best damage. It is easy to play a Bard class at the basic level, but the difference between a highly skilled Bard and a beginner is huge. So then in my summary, the positives are that the most Bard builds are cheap, it is pretty beginner friendly, she has high self-protection, and this class is always wanted in endgame raids. And then for the negatives, you have no mobility skills. As you are a support, you become very reliant on your party. And then lastly, you will have to be very familiar with the other player classes to get the maximum potential, and that's about it. So then for the last and final class, we have the Paladin, and as he is a support class, we will put him right in the support category. So the Paladin mainly serves as a support class in groups and is a highly requested role for endgame content. However, this does not mean that he is incapable of playing solo, because he has decent amount of AoE damage as well. And don't forget to group up your enemies before using AoE skills for the highest efficiency possible. Where the previous Bard support class prevents damage by focusing on high shield uptime, the Paladin tries to prevent damage by using damage reduction skills on allies and much more. So now for my last and final conclusions for this build. The Paladin has high survivability, he has high damage buffs, decent party healing over time, and lastly he has high damage reduction for your teammates. And then for the downsides, the Paladin has low shield buffs, he has lower heal efficiency, and for this class to work it will require proper positioning, and last but not the least, the Paladin has lower mana regeneration buffs, and that's about it. So I really do appreciate everyone for watching, guys, and I hope you enjoyed it. If you have any suggestions, feedback, or maybe you have a different idea about a class on this PvE tier list, then you're feel free to leave your comments in the comment section down below. And while you're doing that, please click like, subscribe, and enable that notification bell, so this way you could support the channel and you won't miss any more amazing content from me. With all this said, you have an amazing day, and I'll catch you in my next video. So take it easy, peace.